Lesson 14, Part 2, Comparative Adjectives. I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning for this lesson here. You've studied comparative adjectives probably in your English grammar classes before, but they haven't really gone into much depth of detail of exactly the structure of what's going on in your sentences, whether you're comparing adjectives or comparing nouns or things like that. So there's going to be some of this English portion that you're looking at and going, whoa, I had no idea that we do this in English, but you do it very naturally in English. So it's just a matter of becoming aware of what it is that you already do and then making the Greek apply to that, which is just a little bit unusual, like I said, because you probably haven't actually studied this structure before in English because you do it naturally if you're a native English speaker. So don't let it throw you when you're going to see a few things that you're like, what on earth is going on here? If you stop and you take a good look at it, you'll understand exactly what is happening. All right, in English, we use adjectives to compare two things or people, or more than two things or people. Hopefully you're familiar with that part at least already. So I am taller than my sister, or I am the tallest of the girls. I am more athletic than my sister. I am the most athletic of the girls. So we have different forms of the English adjective. When we make a comparative adjective, we add the suffix er, or we say more before the adjective. We make a superlative adjective by adding the suffix est or saying most before the adjective. Little tip here, if it's a one-syllable word, except for fun, we add er or est. If it's a two-syllable word, it depends on the word. It could go either way. Consult a dictionary if you're uncertain. If it's more than two syllables, such as athletic here is 3, then you're going to use more or most. Now, English structure of the phrase, this is probably what you're not very familiar with here. For comparing two things, the examples 1 and 3 above, we typically use this structure. We use a noun and then a linking verb, then a comparative adjective, then than, and then another noun. And notice it's the word than, not the word then. It's not telling a time. This than with an A is a comparative word. For comparing 3 or more things, examples 2 and 4 above, we typically use this structure: noun, linking verb, superlative adjective of, and then another noun. Now for Greek, this is what we're going to do for the actual adjective. Now these are a little bit weird, but stick with it, it'll be okay. In Greek, most comparative adjectives are made by adding ter or sometimes ater between the stem and the first and second declension endings, such as mikroteros or paneratera. So you can see mikros there, we've thrown in an ater in the middle, and that's made it comparative. So instead of little, it's littler or smaller or more little, I guess. Paneras, we took that, and instead of just being evil, now it's more evil. Superlative adjectives are much more rare and mostly irregular, but the regular ones use atat, which sometimes lengthens to otat, or ist, between the stem and first and second declension endings, such as hagiotate or elachistatas. So hagias, we know, means holy, so this is holiest. Elachistas, I'm not sure if we've actually learned elachas before, but this is going to be, I believe, smallest. Some words that aren't adjectives can become comparative adjectives by adding a comparative suffix. So ace is the preposition in. Esoteros means inner. Exo is an adverb meaning outside, so exoteros means outer. Kata is a preposition meaning down, so katoteros means lower. Pra is a preposition meaning before, so proteros means prior, or the one that is before, or the more before one. Unfortunately, there are a lot of irregular comparatives and superlatives. Oh, one more note on that last page here. As far as trying to form these, you're never going to need to try to form one of these. It's a matter of recognition. So don't worry about, oh, is it going to be ter or ater? It really doesn't matter. Just whichever one happens to show up is what you're worried about. Oh, is it going to be atat, otat, or is? Whichever one shows up, just be able to recognize those as being superlative features. Be able to recognize these as being comparative features. Now, as I said, unfortunately, there are a lot of irregular comparatives and superlatives. So here are some irregular comparatives. Agathos also often becomes kraton, which means better. Kakos becomes kairon, which means worse. Megas can show up in one of two different ways. It can become maidzone, which means bigger, or meidzateros, which also means bigger, which is mostly regular, except that it's got this iota zeta going on here instead of the gamma, but it's going to function like a regular one, which will be important in the next part of the lesson here. Mikros can show up in three different ways. It can become elasone, which means smaller. It can become elakistateros, which means smaller, or it can become mikroteros, which is smaller, which is regular. I believe elakistateros is also regular. I'm pretty sure about that one. Polus becomes pleon, which means more. And irregular comparatives take modified third declension endings. So you can see these ones that have the teros endings, those are going to take the first and second declension endings like we mentioned before. These ones with own endings, that's because we're taking third declension endings. So they'll take these endings here. Own, anas, ani, ana, which is going to be the same for the feminines. And then the neuters will only be different in the nominative and accusative, where they always are for that. Then we're going to have anes, anon, oops, spacing error here, asi, anas. So anes, anon, asi, anas. Feminines will be the same. Neuters will only be different for the nominative and the accusative there. And note how the masculine and feminine are always the same. Neuter is only different from the masculine and feminine in the nominative and in the accusative because it always is different there. All right, irregular superlatives. Agathos becomes kratistas, which means best. Mikros becomes elakistas, which means smallest. Megas becomes megistas, which is biggest, and that one is regular. Polus becomes pleistas, which means most. Pra becomes protos, which means first, and these have first and second declension endings. So even if they're slightly irregular in one way or another, they're still going to take totally normal endings. Notice you already know protos first, and you already know presbyteros, older or elder, as their own adjectives, but they are technically superlatives. Protos is a superlative, and presbyteros is a comparative. You see the tear in there. You just never learned presbos or whatever else it would have been, which would be old, but we learned it as presbyteros, which is older or elder. Also note from now on, except for these two, protos and presbyteros, comparative and superlative adjectives should add comp or super added to the end of their parsing, such as MSN comp or NPN NPA super. So that will help us make sure we're paying attention to whether the comparative or superlative. All right, so that's the form of the actual words. Now we need to look at the structure of the phrase. In Greek, a comparative phrase is formed like this: noun plus a comparative adjective that needs to agree with the first noun in gender, number, and case, and then another noun in the genitive. So in English, we had, for example, I am taller than my sister. That was a noun. Then we had a linking verb, which we don't have here. Then we had a comparative adjective, didn't have to agree because it's English. Then we had the word than, which is missing here. And then we had another noun, but we don't have case. So here we got a noun, same. Comparative adjective has to agree. The agree is different. Then we've got another noun, and it has to be in the genitive. Or we can have this structure. Noun, same. Comparative adjective agreeing, same. A, which is roughly equivalent to than, and then another noun in the same case as the first noun. So it'll be matching this noun in case. It may or may not match in gender or number. It just depends on what's going on. And A normally means or, but here it's going to mean than. So this is an additional meaning for the word a. It is still a conjunction though. Because it is Greek, these words can come in a different order, such as the adjective coming first. And the first noun can be dropped out to make the adjective substantive. So here's an example of one. He will do things that are greater than these. So this is the he will do. There is no things in this sentence, but we can pull it out of the ending. And then a greater, we have to supply our than, and then a these or a these things. Occasionally, entire phrases will be compared or something else slightly weird will happen, but it's normally pretty clear from context. So we've got this one going on here, which means people loved darkness more than they loved light. All right, so we've got the men loved the dark more than the light. Now, in English, it's pretty clear exactly what's going on. In Greek, it's abundantly clear that the light is not loving the darkness. The men are loving the darkness more than the men are loving the light. But occasionally, you'll have a sentence like, I love him more than you. Well, is it I love him more than you love him, or is it I love him more than I love you? Occasionally in English, it's ambiguous, it's unclear, and so you may need to supply, because in Greek, it's going to be clear. These are both an accusative, so these are what's being compared, or really really what's happening is it's an elliptical. There should be another whole hoi anthropoi hegapesan over here before taphos. But we didn't need it in Greek because they're both in the accusative. If this were in the nominative, though, you would probably need to repeat the whole phrase or repeat the whole clause and put that in as the subject. But normally it's going to be pretty clear. Normally it's going to be pretty obvious what's going on. And note, malon can be used in comparisons to mean more. We've seen it before as sort of like an adverb, but here it can be used as an adjective doing a comparison like this. Here's another example. This one means no man has greater love than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. So here's the that a man lay down his life for his friends is this part here on the end. So no one has, or no man has greater than this love. That one's a little bit weird, which is why we translate it into greater love than this. You could say love that is greater than this. That might also be a good way to say that. Lots of different options on how we could translate this, but that's a kind of structure that can show up. Here's another one. Again, he sent other servants more than the first. So again, he sent other servants. Which servants more than the first, or the first servants is what's going on there. Here's another example. It is not righteous in the sight of God to hear you more than to hear God. So righteous not is before God, to hear you more than God. This is in the genitive. So this is in the genitive. So God is taking the place of you. So it's sort of like a direct object, but a kuo takes a direct object in the genitive. So to hear you more than to hear God. You could have dropped out the here. It is not righteous in the sight of God to hear you more than God. It's plenty clear enough in English. All right, so summary. Stick with it here. Comparative adjectives compare two people or things. Superlative adjectives compare three or more people or things. In Greek, most comparative adjectives are made by adding ter or ater between the stem and first, second declension endings. In Greek, most superlative adjectives are made by adding atot, which sometimes lengthens to otot, or ist between the stem and first, second declension endings. Irregular comparatives take modified third declension endings, where the masculine and feminines are always identical and the neuter is only different in the nominative and accusative. So that's for comparatives. We're not taking first and seconds, we're taking thirds. Superlatives, even the irregulars, take normal ones. In Greek, a comparative phrase is formed like this: noun plus comparative adjective that agrees in gender, number, and case, and another noun in the genitive. Or it can be formed this way: noun plus comparative adjective that agrees in gender, number, case, plus a plus a noun in the same case as the first. These words can come in a different order, such as the adjective coming first, and the first noun can be dropped out to make the adjective substantive. Occasionally, entire phrases will be compared, or something else slightly weird will happen, but it's normally pretty clear from context. And you need to learn the forms of the adjectives, and you can see the lesson page for this. There's some flashcards and some other things there for that.